With that, I'm gonna want to introduce Ross and David. So maybe Ross, you can start with just tell us who you are, where are you based, how did you end up here?
Sure. Thanks, Hans.
Bolina.
I'm like many people here, I'm a software engineer by background. Today I spend most of my time with customers, meaning IoT customers, and I'm going to tell you some of their stories today. And I'm telling you these stories from Seattle, so I'm local. I'm one of the fortunate ones that didn't lose power today, but I'm here in Montlake talking to you.
All right. Thanks, Ross. David?
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm David Tischler. I'm a developer advocate at Balena, and I am coming to you from Phoenix, where we don't have weather events other than hot. That's the only type of weather we have down here. So no power loss down here. And you mentioned earlier, Hans, I'm actually going to be presenting next month, a little bit deeper dive, but I wanted to come and check out what I've heard is a pretty awesome platform here, AirMeet. So I wanted to kind of get the lay of the land before I jump into it next month.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So Ross, do you want to? I'm going to stop sharing, and
okay.
You can switch to you.
All right.
And I'll go.
Okay, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us, even those of you that might be doing this by candlelight huddled around your phones. Thanks for being here. I think we're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about some large IoT fleets and how they came to be large, and we're going to do that across industries, so you'll see some, I think, interesting examples. And from those, my goal here is to extract for you some of the key challenges that were faced in getting those fleets set up and scaling them to 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 devices in the fleet, however large they are. So the fun part is the fleets themselves. The serious bits are the key challenges faced in getting there. And I also have a brief demo for you. As David said, he's going to go deeper into the technology next month. I'm going to go a little bit into the technology today to give you a flavor of the kind of solutions to those challenges. And if you like what you see, come back next month and David will go into much more detail on those. By the way, please do ask questions as we go. If we were doing this in person, and we'll do that again someday, I would ask you to just yell out your questions, and I'll try and answer them as I go.
Yeah, and I'll, Ross, real quick, I'll keep an eye also on chat over on the right-hand side I see over there, so I'll filter anything for you.
Great, appreciate it. We've already introduced ourselves, so let's now introduce Bolina, just to give you some context for how we came to have this knowledge, and we'll talk about some of the solutions that we offer to some of the challenges discussed. So we have this interesting vantage point across the IoT world because we're entirely focused on IoT fleet owners. And so we have many customers, with large fleets, and we've been doing this since 2013, and we're now up to about 100 employees. So we've seen a lot collectively over the years. And I want to share some of those things with you today as we go through. The one-sentence summary of Bolina is that we provide an infrastructure to develop, deploy, and manage fleets of connected devices at scale. And the challenges that we're going to talk about today are related to those verbs. So we're going to talk about challenges in developing, and challenges in deploying, and challenges in managing those large fleets. We have a very nice set of customers. That's where these stories come from. They span from ag tech to construction tech and other prop tech to drones and robotics and transportation and so forth. And we're going to talk about a few of these customers on the list today explicitly. And as you ask questions as we go along, where there may be more customer stories to bring into it. Let's talk about fleet for just a moment. So when we talk about fleet, we always start with a fleet of one, right? As we're building our applications and understanding what's possible. And then we have more devices in the fleet. And then things get interesting when you have larger fleets, and perhaps you have multiple fleets with different kinds of devices to accomplish your business goals. And this is where Bolina starts to be really helpful, and where the stories come from with this, where you have devices, fleets of 100 devices or 1,000 devices or 10,000 devices. Turns out Google Slides does not like it when you put 10,000 devices on one slide. So this is not 10,000, but imagine large fleets as we go. We're entirely focused on fleet owners, so we have a suite of products for fleet owners. I mention this because some of you may have used Balena Etcher. Generally, when we talk to folks, about 10%, sometimes 20% of people say, oh yeah, I've used that at work or to flash my hobby projects or so forth. You may know that as Resin Etcher, because that's the old name of Bolina. But our focus today is going to be specifically around the technology provided by Bolina Cloud and how it helps solve certain key challenges in building those large fleets. We're going to come back to this diagram a couple of times as we talk about some of the tech today. With this slide right now, all we're going to do is name this dude here so we can refer to him. And this is David the developer. Right? So we're going to talk about David the developer from time to time as we go through.
I'm honored. I'm just honored.
I was just going for the alliteration, David.
Oh, okay. I'm not so honored.
It's indicative, though, because the majority of our customers are software developers, the people that work with software developers. They're also operators and some others, but our product is primarily focused at the developers and how they create these applications and scale them. So these are the stories from those developers. I've talked about challenges several times here. Here's another list of challenges. We're going to hit some of these, but I wanted to provide you with additional lists of challenges that you may hit as you're growing a fleet and so forth. So again, hopefully the takeaway from this is to think about some of those challenges as if you're trying to build a fleet, what you should be thinking about and finding solutions for. Not necessarily the solutions I'm going to present to you today, but you'll probably hit a subset of these challenges as you start to build out a fleet. So here's the meat of the presentation today, where we're going to go through examples of IoT fleets. For each one of them, we're going to look at the business case, what they're doing. We're going to look at the key challenges that they faced in that, and we're going to look at tech that solves those key challenges. So, all right, let's have some fun with these now. So let's talk about Skycatch and about choosing a system that can scale a fleet. So Skycatch has this really fun construction tech, prop tech product. It's a pairing of drones and base stations that fly around large construction sites and take, of course, photos of what's going on, but also do smart things with that visual information. For instance, doing object recognition and identifying what's actually on a site and so forth, and doing many other things with that data, and then supplying that as information to the general contractor and other people involved in the management of large construction projects. It's a wonderful system. They created a very good application for this, but they recognized early on that to have a viable business, they couldn't have 10 or 100 of these. They needed to have thousands of them. So they saw it as a very good problem when they somewhat quickly got their first order for 1,000 units. And they recognized they had challenges to go with that. You know, how do we actually provision that many devices? How do we get our application on those devices? How do we update that application for all these devices that may be distributed across the country or across the world. Those sorts of challenges. So they need to choose a system that can scale a fleet. Now, scaling is a problem that computer science has been wrestling with for decades, right? So there are solutions to draw from to do this. And the solution that Skycatch chose to use, the solution that Bolina created, is based on containers. So some of you in the audience are probably familiar with containers. Some of you may not be, so just a quick word on what they are before I describe this slide. The analogy to use is shipping containers. So it's a very Seattle analogy to use. If you think of the shipping containers that you see in the harbor or over on Harbor Island, imagine here David, the developer, loading whatever he wants inside those shipping containers. And it's Balina's job to act as the harbor crane in the vessels to make copies of those, whatever in the shipping container, and deliver it wherever it needs to be. In other words, deliver it to that distributed fleet of IoT devices. For those of you that are familiar with container-based development, this is a Docker-compatible system. So it's familiar territory for some of you, I'm sure. But this is a highly optimized system for containers in an IoT environment. Right, so these are small systems, often connected lightly to the internet. So that needs to take that world reality into account here. So what we have on screen here is a small, minimal Yocto-based operating system custom built for the purpose of being a host operating environment for containers on IoT fleets. And we've been doing this for 7 years now, so this is a proven in production kind of thing. And we're going to talk about some of the benefits of doing this as we go. If you're familiar with containers, you probably recognize some of these that, it gives you a way to, get a single application out to all of these devices that need to have them and to update them and so forth. And we'll see a little bit about how that operates. But when you think about, so to close out on this slide, if you think about a fleet of devices, and every one of those devices, at least in the way that we approach the world, has a host operating system and a set of an application in one or more containers on that device. Where the Raspberry Pi is, of course, the prototypical IoT device here. Now, we'll see some of those benefits as we go through a few more slides here for what happens, but this is really the basis of it and where it starts from. Let's talk about another challenge in choosing hardware, and let's talk about that in the context of in-farm. So in-farm is also really quite interesting. They grow herbs and vegetables in your supermarket. And by in your supermarket, I mean places like QFC in University Village and I think in a couple of QFCs in Kirkland. So if you want the very freshest basil, you can get basil that was grown there in the supermarket. Right? And they're in about 1,000 locations today across the world. They're a Berlin, Germany-based company. So it's this very nice system, and you can go see it in QFC and probably other grocery stores soon. They're growing like crazy. That's sort of a pun, I guess, but they're adding more locations. And the hardware challenge here, their hardware choice was they wanted a hardened Pi device. We make one that I'll describe to you, and there's some challenges there about reliability and connectivity and support that we'll talk about in a moment. So it's choosing hardware, seems like a simple thing in some ways. If we think back on our careers to, it's like, oh, yeah, you always have to make hardware choices, but in the world of desktop computers of 20 years ago, you chose a PC or a Mac, and now you choose an iPhone or an Android device. It's not, but in the world of physical computing, there's such a wide variety of needs and therefore a wide variety of hardware that it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. we support 60 device types today, Pis and industrial SBCs and AI-oriented devices like NVIDIA Jetson devices and Google Corals and bigger devices like x86s. And it's a nice set of devices, but of course, as you know, 60 is a subset of the IoT devices in the world. So it's really interesting challenge for someone that wants to build a fleet to say, what's really the right thing for me now and will be the right thing for me in 5 years and will give me the things that I need to do, not just from computing, but also with peripherals, like do I need to talk to CAN bus devices and talk RS-485 and so forth. So it's this really, customers, when they come to us, are often like, there's so many choices. I don't know what to choose from this. So it's one of those cases where it's both wonderful that there's so many choices and it's a challenge for people to select the right one. And let's talk about some of the criteria here and what drove InFarm to choose the Balena fin. And the Balena fin obviously is something that we make. Again, we support 60 devices and they're all first-class citizens in our system. But we made this because essentially customers asked us to. And they were asking for certain things. Would say sometimes, we really love developing for Raspberry Pis because it's so understandable and there's such a community out there of developers. We can, find answers to our questions about it, so forth, but it's not a production device. And I love Pis, and the Pi Foundation will say, they're not production devices. So what do you do? And so that's one of the reasons that the Bolina fin uses the Raspberry Pi compute module, so you get the benefit of that community. But you get things on the fin that give you greater reliability than you get from a Pi. So you need reliable storage. So we've all had SD cards go bad. So we have eMMC type memory storage on the Balena fin. And it works in a wider temperature range and other reasons that it's reliable. But that's a key consideration. And then, as many of you probably know, there's a range of, just how hardened is this device, from enthusiast devices like Pis to industrial-ish devices like the Balena fin to true industrial devices that can withstand lots of noise and lots of signal noise and radiation around it in industrial environments, all the way up to automotive stuff, which is even more extreme, particularly in temperature ranges. Customers also asked for flexible networking, and by that I mean not just Ethernet and Wi-Fi, but also cellular networking. So if you think about the case of InFarm in particular, right, they're in 1,000 supermarkets spread across the world. So really their only choice for connectivity is a cellular mechanism to do that. They're not going to try and join the networks of all the grocery stores and things like this. So if you look at the underside of the fin here, you'll see that there are 2 slots, one of which is for the Raspberry Pi compute module, and one of which is sometimes used for cellular modems that snap in. That also has, the cellular modem aspect of it also clearly has software implications, so it has to be supported and so forth. Also, some customers asked about support in power-constrained environments. So if your business idea is to create these devices that sit on lampposts and are powered by solar, you've got some challenges to solve, right? Even IoT devices draw a significant amount of current, so you've probably got a battery at play with only so much capacity. So our device has a coprocessor on board. That is, you can be always on with the coprocessor, and it only turns the Pi compute module on when needed. So these are, all things that InFarm needed. And they may be some of the challenges that you face as well as you're building out your fleet. How are you going to connect it? Is it going to be reliable enough for you? Is it going to be expandable enough for you, and so forth? And the good news is you got lots of choices. The bad news is you got lots of choices, so sometimes it's a slog to find exactly the right thing for you.
Ross, real quickly, we do have 2 questions that have rolled in. Hans, you want to bring those folks on?
All right, let's start with Carl.
Hi, Carl.
Hey, Carl.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm good. You need to let me know who Suresh is from the last Risk 5, because I don't know who Suresh is, but that's okay.
I will. Yeah, go ahead, ask your question. I'll connect with you after.
Yeah, so this is, I like this, and I also like, I think Ross has really presented it very articulately. I think it's great. But the question I have is more on the hardware side, if you don't mind. So which cellular IoT module vendors are you using for Bolina Fin, number one? And for the when you use the term fleet, I'm always thinking of vehicles, but I guess maybe that's the wrong terminology. But essentially, I'm trying to find out which IoT module vendors you use, number one, and number two. Do you collaborate with the mobile network operators at all with some of these implementations in the field, and or cloud service providers, or both at the same time?
Okay. With regards to good questions, Carl, and they're actually questions that we go over with customers and they say they want to do something like this, because what's implied by your question is absolutely correct, in that there's a wide choice of cellular modems, only some of which are going to get you what you want. Right? There's a software question of which ones are supported, and the answer to that is in our documentation, which I can link you to afterwards.
I'll grab it for you.
Great. Where we recommend a couple of them specifically. And
yeah, I don't actually mean a modem. A modem and a modem are 2 different things, as you know.
Are you referring to the actual SIM card providers then, the cellular providers themselves, like the Soracoms?
No. The actual cellular IoT module, which combines the MCU, it combines the SIM card, and it also combines the modem. That's what a cellular IoT module is, and there are various manufacturers, famous ones like Sierra Wireless, U-Blocks, Telit, and then Gemalto's IoT module. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, David's going to supply you a link that answers that specific question.
Yeah, I'm grabbing it right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
The short answer to that, though, is ultimately if it can be supported from within a container running on top of Bolina OS, again, based on Yocto, and the way in which it interfaces with the hardware, let's use the Pi or a Bolina Fin as an example, which has a 40-pin GPIO header on it. As long as it can talk across, SPI or I2C or something like that, it should work. And I say should because honestly, you've got to test them. I know we have some repos that have explored the UB dots. A more traditional one that I happen to use right here on my desk is a hat. Let me see if this will show up for you large enough. This is a 6-fab hat. It's a little bit different.
Oh, but, my goodness. There was a glitch. You turned.
Are you there?
I'm there, but there was a bandwidth glitch. Oh, cool. Very cool. So are you is this operating on a 4G or perhaps even 5G LTE connectivity, maybe Cat M, or it's not narrowband IoT, is it? Or is it data that you're mostly sending?
Well, so keep in mind one thing. Let's just take one step backwards there and keep in mind that Bolina is all about the fleet management aspect, which is Bolina OS and Bolina Cloud orchestrating the whole thing. The customers themselves can utilize any type of connectivity that they see fit. So in this particular one that I happen to have on my desk, that's just a simple 4G LTE using a QuickTel modem. This is an EC25. The point being, as long as the software will work inside of the container riding atop of Bolina OS, then we don't make any requirements around what you're using. The point being, if you can connect to Bolina Cloud, whether it is Ethernet, Wi-Fi, NB-IoT, and anything that you've got some sort of uplink to quote unquote the internet, that's fine.
Yep, you've just answered my question, actually.
Yep.
So you're using QuickTel's IoT module. I guess the next question is, you also don't care which mobile network operator and which cloud provider. It doesn't matter to you. I get
Not
it.
at all. You could
Can
be
I
on
ask-
Verizon. You could be on
Yeah.
anything
tell you what-
want.
I'll tell you what
Particle.
matters
But-
to me on behalf of you, though, Carl, is that choose something that is reliable and works
Right.
well. If
Right.
you imagine the case of InFarm here, where they've got these devices scattered across the globe, right? If they start to have problems with them, it's an expensive and time-consuming thing. Send technicians out to fix stuff and so forth. So that connectivity is so important in
Let
a
me
system
play
like this. So,
let me play devil's advocate with you, gentlemen, because I was pushing eSIM from 2016 until 2018.
Mhm.
I can tell you that most of these, especially QuickTel, which is one of our vendors, QuickTel is already using embedded SIM modules on
Mhm.
they're using eSIM modules on their IoT modules. So that kind of really does help with having to go into repair, or they can simply update in the field. Okay, I think you guys have. Thank you for answering these questions. I
Sure.
just have one other question.
Hey, Carl,
This
Carl, if you can save it for after the event,
I can actually
because
write it down. Yeah, I'll save it.
yeah, because
Okay.
you'll have an opportunity. I've
Yeah.
set up a table specifically for Bolina,
Sure.
because I have
We'll be
a
there.
bunch of other questions that are lined up as well. And
Yeah, got it.
so
Okay.
yeah, so save that question and or add it in there. And if we don't get to it afterwards, you should be able to connect with David or Ross in the
Thank
lounge
you.
app
Thank you.
once we're done with this. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Awesome questions.
You want to, Hans, do you want to address the two other questions at the moment,
Sure.
or do we want to save
Well,
them and go
it's up to
through?
you guys.
Sure,
Ross?
yeah, we'll take them. I reserve the
Yeah.
right to do as you just did and defer to the end, but I like taking questions as we go, so please.
All right. So Josh.
Yeah. So
Hi, Josh.
hello. I am familiar with your Balena Etcher product, and it's awesome.
Okay.
By the way.
Good. Glad you
But
like it.
my question is more related to how this fits in with other types of IoT ecosystems. So, for example, we use AWS Greengrass, and I'm just trying to figure out, is this like a good platform for managing the OS, or is it also application code as well? And how those interplay, or if it's a competitor from that stance.
Sure. Let me go back to a prior slide to talk about this. So, as you know, when you're writing an application that runs in our environment, you're writing something that's containerized.
Mhm.
And you can put whatever you want inside that container. And many of our customers put inside this container connectivity to other clouds, right? So they've got a sensor network doing building automation or something like that, and they're pushing all this data up into pick your cloud service, something from AWS, something from Microsoft, whatever.
Sure.
Pushing that data up there and working on that data. It's a very typical scenario. You call it multi-cloud, but really our focus is just on the fleet and the health of the fleet and getting updates out to the fleet and so forth. And because we've started from that point, the way that we fit with the other cloud providers out there is that's where the data goes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yep. And was there one more?
There was one more. Yes, I think Hans has got
All
it
right.
now.
Yes. Hey.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks for being here, Russ, David. Quick question. So I'm a finance guy. I'm not going to be as technical as some of these, but I think along the lines of what Josh was asking, I want to understand: is Bolino's product? Are you guys more like your business model? Is it more end-to-end solutions? Are you plugging into an IoT project that a fleet or asset, manager would want to deploy?
The question I heard in there, and you can tell me if this is the right question, is how does Bolina make money? That's always a good question.
Correct. Yeah.
And we charge per device that's in our fleet. So if you want to put 1,000 or 10,000 devices in the fleet, we charge for that. And if you have 10,000 devices, you pay more than if you have 1,000 devices in our system. And we're just providing the infrastructure, right? It's right there in the definition of what we do. We provide the infrastructure for these fleets. So they're your devices. You own the devices. And you add them to our fleet, and they get connected by VPN and things that we'll see like that. But it's really about building up that fleet, and we provide you as part of that, right? You get your fleet brought together, and you get the mechanism for deploying updates and other things that we're going to see as we go through here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. All right.
All right, we shall roll on then. Let's go on to our next example. This is oil and gas, Petrolog. They remotely manage, they provide a system that does remote management of oil wells. It's actually remote operation too. So the oil well that you see here is not, it's a tiny one, as you may have noticed. It's not staffed. The little box over here with a device in it, it's in our system, will actually turn the pump on and off based on fluid levels in the well and other things like that. And so this is very remote and distributed as well. These pumps, these little oil wells are all over the place, and they're managed by that little box right there, making decisions. So that gives us a convenient place to talk about how did that application get onto all of those devices? How did the application get created? And then how did it get updated after that? This is a convenient time to talk about some of the philosophy behind the system here, where we believe that it's your application, it's your container. You can do whatever you want with that. You can write it in whatever language you would like, within certain limits. You can use your own CI/CD system for it and so forth. We're providing this infrastructure that takes your application, with the emphasis on your application, out into this fleet. In fact, that's sometimes the order in which people do things is they build the application, then realize that it's viable and they want to build a fleet of it, and then they go find us and adapt their application appropriately. But it's not in some cases, it's not that big of an adaptation to use our system. We have customers come in that says, I was already building with containers, and I realized I needed a fleet, so this just is a nice fit to things. It's very easy to create an application. David's going to go into detail next month about how you create an application and the various steps that you make, but fundamentally you say, hey, I'm making an application. It's going to be full of Raspberry Pi 3s or NVIDIA Jetson Nanos or something like that. And then you start to add additional devices to this. So you add 10 and 20 devices to it. And they're all part of this one thing. They're all part of this fleet. And they all share this one application that's executing across all of them. And now we're back to our diagram with David, the developer, and we're going to actually trace that path. And we're going to specifically trace the path of how an application gets updated. And of course, this updating an application is one of the key challenges that you're going to face. I'm offering you one solution to it here, but however you choose to do it, you have this issue of you got this perhaps globally distributed fleet, but yet you still need to get updates out to that fleet. And so what David, the developer, does here is through our command line interface and through other mechanisms as well, says, okay, I have finished my updates to the code. It's all set. I've pulled it out of whatever repository it's in. And now I want you to go deploy that out. And when you tell our system to deploy, it first goes out into the cloud. So we have some here we're in the cloud. We have some builders that take whatever you specified in your application and build it for whatever the target device is. So if it's building for Pis or Nanos or Google Coral devices, that build all happens in the cloud, and it creates the images for those containers. Then over here we have the devices, which are connected through all of this by a VPN. It's OpenVPN specifically. And those devices notice that, hey, there's a new update for the application. I'm going to go grab it. So it goes, grabs the container images, and the device and those container images get updated, and the application restarts using those new containers. David, the developer here, can watch all of this happen, can watch the build and see the status on that, can watch as the devices start to update themselves and so forth and see what's going on. All of the things that I just talked about are available through our command line interface, and there's a lot more there, of course, as well. And there's an API for this so that you, as a developer, whether your name is David or not, have the opportunity to not only use what's built in, but to create your own stuff too. So again, the intent here is to provide this infrastructure to handle this challenge of how you update an application across a globally distributed fleet. Here we can see some of that in action. So command issued, you can start to see it's giving you lots of information and it goes through, so you can monitor that. There's also a dashboard that we'll see later where you have a view into your entire fleet, so you can see how many devices you have, how many of them are online, how many of them just updated, what version of the application they're running, that sort of thing. So that's the update application key challenge. Now that you've got applications out there running on lots of devices, how do you support them? Now, let's make the assumption that we're running on reliable hardware, reliably connected, right? So it's not the support as in everything's that there are tons of problems, but there are always going to be some challenges to this. And we can talk about that in the context of Sonder. So Sonder does short-term rentals of apartments and places. Earlier, we were talking in one of the breakout rooms about Roslyn, Washington. Maybe Sonder has some places in Roslyn, Washington you can rent and go hang out for a while. They have their short-term rentals often include a device for keyless entry and smart thermostats and lighting and so forth, and some of that involves our systems. And sometimes something goes wrong. Someone says, hey, calls in, I have a problem. So you need a mechanism to provide that support to check the health of the devices, maybe to know in advance if there's a problem, if something's gone offline that you were not expecting to go offline. You can connect to those devices, assuming they are online, meaning you have remote access. You can look at the logs and so forth for that. So all of those things that you need for support is also provided by this infrastructure that connects everything together. So you can go, you as someone providing support can go across that through to the dashboard and across that VPN to check on things and change things as necessary. Again, I'm offering you one solution that Bolina provides, but the key challenge here is to support when you've got that big fleet of things out there. This is what a dashboard looks like. So we see a number of devices here that are in the fleet. So, we see about 10 devices or so. We'll see in a minute what happens when you have a much larger set of devices and how you can handle that. But you can look at each of those devices. You can see details about an individual device, for instance, this one, where you can look to see, look at the logs and see what's shown up lately. You can connect to either your application or you can connect to the host operating system, the Bolina OS host that's hosting all of this, and see what's going on, and if you need to look at things or restart the device, or all that's available to you through this interface. So it brings a fairly rich set of information back to who's ever providing support. And in this case, as we see, it's David Tischler that's providing support on that device.
David the developer.
David the developer, that's right. We'll come back to this interface in a few minutes when we talk about higher scale things. How are we doing for questions?
I don't see any there.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. We do have.
Josh has another one.
Yep.
Carl had a question, but I don't see him. It looks like he got disconnected. So
Okay.
I'll bring Josh on.
Hello again, Josh.
Hi. So about this interface, I was curious, is this front end something that can be integrated into another overall dashboard?
You could.
So like,
I mean,
if you had your own, I was just curious, like, is this a hosted, or is this code that, can be integrated into something else?
oh, there's so many good ways to answer that question. Makes it a good question. This is all, what you're seeing on screen is a UI that we provide.
Okay.
For this, right? But there's also an API for this, so you can create your own views on things and do your own things.
Okay.
What this is not is an interface designed for your customer, right? So Sonder would not give their customers, the people who own the apartments or the people that are renting an apartment, they would not give them direct access to something like this. They might call it a dashboard, they would build something else, right, that connects to it. Yeah. And
So
of
this
course,
is developer dashboard.
this is developer and support, or developer
Okay.
and operator, if you will. It comes out of the box, and you can build other things if you wish to, and either based on the API that we provide, or it may be something completely different that your application, is producing lots of data, and you want to build a dashboard so your customers can view that data. That's perfectly doable within the system as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Now let's talk about Dwello and scaling a fleet. So Dwello, see, if you're moving into a Dwello apartment, it's a smart apartment. They don't own the buildings; they provide a service to people that own buildings. So if you're an apartment owner, you've got a 100-unit building, and you can say, hey, as a competitive advantage in the real estate rental marketplace, I want to have a clear perk of a smart apartment that's got smart lights, and it's got a smart thermostat, maybe smart locks on it as well. And if you rent something in that building, when you move in, not only do you move your physical stuff in, but there's kind of a digital move in as well, where you're granted access to all of these things that are already installed, and you put the apps on your phone and connect to your smart lights and things like that. It turns out it's a nice perk. So Dwello has grown like crazy, which is fantastic. So this is in thousands and thousands of apartments now. So they have a very large fleet of devices, which is a good thing to have, but there also needs to be mechanisms that go with that. And the challenge I'm presenting here is there's a difference between having 100 devices in your fleet and having 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 devices in your fleet, and you need mechanisms for handling that. It's a very complex topic because no large fleet is the same, but I'm going to talk about a few of the things that can help with that. And some of these are classic computer science things that you'll recognize, and some of them are not. Some of the things you'll recognize are like, oh, well, we really not only we'll leave development and testing aside and say that's already done and good, but now in the context of this fleet, you may want to have release policies about which of your devices are running which version of the application, and maybe you do staged releases, so a new release goes out kind of slowly across your fleet so you can see if there are going to be additional problems with that. Maybe you want to be not just staged, but very careful with some canaries out there in environments that you can support if there's something happens. And so there's a canary mechanism that we provide for that. And then there are also more configuration level things so that you can have a bunch of mechanisms by which you can change the behavior of your fleet devices out in the field without changing code. So we provide a mechanism with various kinds of variables, environment variables and configuration variables that exist at both a fleet and a device level, so that you have all these options for control over this very large fleet. It's also true that when you, at large fleets, we can't possibly anticipate, and you as an individual building a large fleet really can't anticipate all the things that you're going to need. And that's one of the reasons that we provide an API, so that if you have this large fleet with very specialized needs, that it can be worth building the tools on top of the API to do that. And if you're really into this topic, by the way, we have a fleet management masterclass, which presents all kinds of challenges that you need to face and how we handle those challenges.
Ross, real quickly, I just dropped that link from your slide deck into chat for folks. So they can simply click away.
That's it for the examples. I have a demo coming up in just a moment, but do we have any more questions before the demo?
Hang on. We still have Carl's question, his second question, but I still don't see him.
Okay.
Do you want to, so I can ask it, or if you want to carry on with the demo, and we can do it at the end.
Let's wait for Carl to come back since he'll have the context for that.
I might be able to just actually pretty quickly. Hold on, where did it go? It was referring to blockchain, and honestly, the answer to that one really is it was data integrity and how to ensure it. And really, that's up to the customer. We, as the fleet management layer, really wouldn't get involved there anyway. The workload that the customer is running is their own. They are the ones that are crafting the container. They're the ones that then pushing and deploying the container. How they verify, validate, ensure data integrity really is up to them. It's not actually a Bolina function that we're necessarily even involved with.
Right. And the vernacular of that, you can do whatever you want inside these containers as long as it's legal, right?
Yeah.
For your containers, right?
Yeah. Keep it legal. Other than that.
All right. Josh had another question.
Okay.
It's a pretty easy one. Josh, I guess. So if you, there we go. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to hog the questions.
No worries.
It's fine.
No worries.
Yeah, it's good. Go ahead.
Questions.
So our application involves ITAR type data. So running in, being able to isolate and in semi-air gapped high security situations. Is there anything here that presents a challenge to doing those types of things?
It's a very good question, whose answer is kind of long, actually. So I'll see if we give the short version now, and if we sit down at a table afterwards, can do the long version of this.
Sure, we can table it.
Well, the short answer is we have people doing this now with semi-air gapped environments. Right. Some of the challenges there are, is it how semi is semi? And meaning, can you get updates out to the devices sometimes? Are these devices within your physical control otherwise? Can you apply updates manually to those devices, USB stick kind of manually and so forth? So the answer is it can be done in an air-gapped. We have customers doing it today in an air-gapped way, and there's also a more sophisticated solution that allows that sort of air-gapped for truly air-gapped things. But that answer, I think, I'll reserve for the table so we can talk through that.
Yeah, I was just going to say I have a couple thoughts on it as well, but we can probably take that offline after the fact.
Because after all, the devices are offline, right? So we should take the conversation offline.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, I'm going to do a brief demo, mostly to just let you know that we have a bunch of demos you can try. So this one I set up in under an hour, I think. It's a little people counter. It's running on an NVIDIA Jetson Nano. This is a developer kit version of that. And it just says, it counts people as they go past, so it identifies, is that a person that just went past, or was that a dog, whatever. And note that I even used the AIoT acronym here. I read an article recently summarizing IoT happenings in 2020, and this article declared that the IoT buzzword of the year was AIoT. So there we go. So I'm going to stop sharing this slide deck just for a moment and share something else. Share the demo. All right, so right now you're looking at the ceiling of my office. And now I'm going to just send it down to me, and hopefully it's going to detect me as a person. So right now I am 98% human. That's pretty good. And that's running on this little device over here. This Jetson Nano, and I've got a USB webcam in my hand that's providing that image to you. And this is one of the many starter demos that we have. And it's a good time for me to mention that Bolina Cloud is free for up to 10 devices. So if you just want to try this, you're welcome to just try it. And I'll mention some others in just a moment, other example projects you can try. We also have a fair number of users that just do things around the house for free with Bolina. Like I was talking to one customer who said, who's a customer now but wasn't before, and said, "Oh yeah, I've used Bolina around the house for years. I set up the irrigation system for my garden." Using Bolina. It's like, okay, great. So they had 5 or 6 devices spread around, and we're perfectly happy. That's a lovely thing to hear about. All right, we're back to the deck now. There's some more challenges that we can talk about here, and I'll come back to this slide and maybe talk about a few of these customers and kinds of challenges that they had. Unless if time permits. But we may have some questions coming up here in just a moment. And I do have one thing I wanted to show you. I couldn't fit this underwater rover, this open ROV, into the slide deck. I didn't have an example of a key challenge to match up with it, but I just love this video of our tech inside this underwater rover taking pictures. It's just lovely. Last slide here. There's a link to our website where you can find out more. There's lots of documentation there too, so you can not only see the customer stories that we've just talked about, there are a lot of case studies there. You can read the docs like the Fleet Management Masterclass that David linked to. And I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, but our most popular starter project where you just want to sort of see how this works is Bolina Sound, where you can take, say, a Raspberry Pi and use that to create a synchronized multi-room audio system. And it's pretty easy to set up.
Yep, that if you're strictly talking GitHub stars, that one is the most popular. Definitely, we see the most forum users and most folks, tweeting about that, or even YouTube videos and things like that. So yeah, that one's definitely the most popular. But there are some others out there as well. There's Bolina Dash, which is a kiosk project, essentially taking a Raspberry Pi or similar type of device hooked up to an LCD panel or an HDMI monitor. Bolina Sense is out there, and that one uses BME 280 or BME 680 environmental sensors, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. So yeah, there's quite a few of them. You can check them out.
Okay, you had a question?
Yeah, I got invited to the stage. Thanks, Hans. Very, very simple question, but I thought appropriate for the topic is
Okay.
some of the challenges that your customers have seen in deploying IoT projects on a bigger scale, right? So I've spoken with a number of companies that operate in the IoT space, and challenges that they've seen is they've been able to deploy at the pilot scale, but once that happens, they don't seem to see a lot of traction in these bigger, companies, these bigger customers. What are you guys seeing in, just in general that are some, hurdles or challenges being able to deploy in full force, bigger scale?
Sure. I mean, uh, you led in with this is a simple question, and in some ways it is, but there are lots of answers that I could give to the question. So it's a good question. Many of the challenges that we talked about here fit with that, because especially the last few challenges that had some discussion of scale around them. Functionally, with our system at least, there really isn't a difference between, say, 100 and 1,000 devices in a fleet. But as you get above that, then you need more sophisticated mechanisms for managing them and really being able to service all of those devices and prevent problems that are going through and so forth. And David linked you to the Fleet Management Masterclass, which talks about a number of those challenges that you meet with larger fleets. And David, you may want to have some thoughts on this as well, with some of the things that you've seen with our customers in large fleets. And
Yeah, there's a couple different things here to unpack. One of them, quite honestly, is precisely the whole pain that Bolina Cloud is attempting to solve, which is the management and maintenance once the devices are out in the field. I think that customers, I shouldn't say customers as in Bolina Cloud customers. I think a better way to put it is not customers, but as enterprises that are undertaking an IoT project, which is precisely what you say, that are piloting but then don't move to production. And I think a part of that is precisely because they don't have a good strategy around, once the devices are deployed, how do they manage and maintain them? It gets very expensive to go out and, manually intervene with devices once they're already shipped out. So I think a lot of people put the cart in front of the horse, don't think about the ramifications. Anybody can buy a Raspberry Pi, okay? They're globally available, they're $35. People can prototype easily, but taking the leap into production, you're right. There's still education and lessons learned that, honestly, that's my job, is to ensure that folks know these things. So you're right. We have seen it. I wouldn't say it's so much of a Bolina customer problem, because at the point that they have reached out to us or have stumbled upon us or have gone to global deployments and have fleets of devices, they've already now sort of passed that initial hurdle. The hardware can be a challenge. People prototype on their desk on a Raspberry Pi. Therein lies the use case that Ross spoke about earlier of a Bolina Fin, which is, a more enterprise and industrial strength version of the core compute capacity of a Raspberry Pi. But when folks try to pivot to other hardware, they get into the mess that is booting some of these devices. They get in situations where kernel modules U-boot, loading drivers into containers. It gets to be a little bit of an undertaking that they might not have originally anticipated. So there's a lot that goes into it. I don't have a single answer. It's just something where education and experience really do
So, if I probe on the question, I may have misinterpreted it. I interpreted the question as you've talked to people that struggle to create very large fleets. But did I misinterpret? And is the question really you talk to people that have challenges getting from a prototype phase with 20 devices to an actual deployed out in the field, across several countries? Where the process are they?
Yeah, so I would say that, so we've had clients, right, they're IoT clients similar to what you all are doing from an end-to-end solution. They are able to deploy a pilot, and these could be large, 10 to 50 million, IoT projects, but it's one pilot project. Then they get to a roadblock where they are not able to, replicate that across multiple facilities or multiple sorts of assets. And is there a mindset of the customer that says, okay, they are just not able to fully scale beyond that?
Well, I have to wonder if they're not seeing business value upon completion of the pilot. Like, are they not achieving, are they not achieving the results that they wanted? The other end of the spectrum would be, scaling is tough without having, some of that infrastructure underneath. Whether it's Bolina Cloud or one of our competitors. I mean, there are others out there, but a homegrown system is really hard. We've been working on Bolina Cloud for 7.5, maybe 8 years. I have to go check the exact dates, but look, we've been at it for 8 years. I promise that we have built a solution that meets the needs of a fleet owner. Right now, if an organization is going to try to undertake that in and of themselves in their own engineering, starting right now, Bolina's got an 8-year head start on it. But the fact is it's hard to do. So some of it could simply be that the homegrown solutions are it's a massive undertaking that people underestimate.
And to follow on David there, we don't tend to see our customers fail from pilot to production. Right? They may choose not to continue because the pilot, as David alluded to, the business case wasn't there, it's not what they expected, and so forth. But we tend not to have customers struggle going from 20 to 100 devices, let's say, or from 100 to a couple hundred. We do have prospective customers that we may have talked to, a year prior to this, and they said, we're going to do this. We decided to do it on our own and build our own system, our own infrastructure for doing the updates, and then come back and say, okay, we've done a pilot, and we used our own system for doing that, and we realized that's not going to scale. And they come back and convert their application or adapt their application. Sometimes it's not that hard to work in our system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful.
Cool.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, you.
Yeah. Thanks, Hans.
All right. I think that was it for questions.
Excellent.
Cool. So thank you, Ross. Thank you, David. So as soon as I end this session, it's going to take you back to the virtual lounge. Like I mentioned earlier, I have there's a number of tables set up, but there's two that are there's one for IoT Hub Meetup. If you have any questions about the Meetup group, I'll be there. And then there's another one for Bolina, and one of these guys will be there to answer more questions. And otherwise, it's pretty easy. Just click on join and turn on your camera, and it's just like a small group of a small Zoom call. So thank you, guys. Thank you very much. And
thanks, everybody.
We'll post David's meetup in February here in the next week or so. And otherwise, hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow. And actually, I'll see you guys in the lounge. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Right.